Ahoy! Things in New World are finally worth happening, there are things worth talking about. Beginning today with a very major update, update 5.02. We have been waiting forever and ever for anything to happen, any fixes to come in, but the reason why this probably took so long is another very major change that is coming with this, which I did not expect to come between seasons. I thought this would be a season-sized patch, but I guess they're trying to test it now. Either way, we'll get into it. First of all, we have the Rabbit's Revenge event once again, like every year, and there are some new rewards here. There is a corrupted Flail skin, a corrupted armor skin, and an emote that you can get. I will quickly show you a little bit more information about this. You can see this right here. We have the normal rewards, we have the diamond gypsum that you can get from the rabbits. They are all over Turnham. All of them are just corrupted. Then you have your defiled rabbit's foot with a relatively high chance. You have the corrupted rabbit mask with a 1.5% chance or guaranteed after 200 corrupted rabbits. Then you have the weapon skin for the flail, guaranteed after 300 and also with a 1% chance. You have the corruption's barricade skin, that is the armor skin with an 0.5% chance or guaranteed after 350. And you once again have the storage chest as well with an 0.25% chance or after 400 corrupted rabbits. I will say generally, I don't really care for this event very much. I think it's extremely boring, but the chest piece here looks pretty cool. It's a pretty solid looking one. I'm not sure if the rest of the armor belongs to it. I don't think so. I think it's just a chest piece. It comes with a cloak as well, but yeah, that's it. But the real big thing and the reason why this patch probably took so long are shards. If you're not familiar with shards, it's basically a technology that can split the players in an area in multiple different so-called shards. They can't see each other, they can interact with each other through certain things like Whisper, for example. You can do a party invite or something like that, but they're generally not visible to each other. They're not on the same plane, so to speak. They're on a separate plane, and this is done to alleviate the load in those specific regions, the load times to get into those regions as well. And this is obviously especially relevant for starting areas. Once again, a thing that very clearly hints towards the console release, because obviously that would lead to a situation where there are a lot of players in the same place at the same time, and these shards will specifically be for the starting beaches in Monarch's Bluff and Windswood, so goes completely in line with that. There are also some other things along with that, so they are considering to do that in other places in the future. Of course, depends on where it will be needed in the first place. At the moment, I don't think we really need shards anywhere. We need new players first for that to happen. But for example, there are certain things here that I mentioned, like if you're in a group, it's prioritized to stay together on the same shard as long as there's capacity. Solo players will be paired with friends or company members on the same shard when possible, and you can join someone else to be on the same shard. So it's not like you're completely isolated and have no option to be together under specific circumstances. Area chat is limited to people on the same shard, while the global chat remains unchanged. Activities that are in proximity, like trading, music, dueling and stuff, require to be on the same shard. What I think is particularly important and relevant is there is a dedicated PvP shard. This is a single shard for PvP to ensure fair play. So people that flag for PvP on non-PvP shards will be transferred to the PvP shard. Effectively meaning if you're a pure PvP player, you will never be sharded. But then again, it doesn't really matter at the moment when this is just in the starting areas where people aren't going to be flagged anyways. I guess eventually it's going to matter in Windswood though. As such, there's not really any late game interference for this, unless this is bugged, of course. But like when it comes to the territory control or anything along those lines, that will not be impacted. Camps remain in the shards where they were placed. And when you recall to your camp, you can recall to your camp location without being forced into its shard, which is interesting. I'm not sure how that's going to work. And if a shard is shut down with your camp in it, the camp will be removed and you'll be notified. Again, probably won't matter all too much. But yeah, the technology is there. I have seen some people talk about this potentially meaning that Megaservers might be coming, and that's where we get sharding. I don't believe there's any indication of that here. Sure, the technology is there now, but I don't see how those two things are inherently connected. Of course, if you want to have Megaservers, you need sharding, but that's not the only reason why you may want to have sharding. And in this case, I think it's simply because of the new player experience. At the moment, the player population doesn't really require Megaservers in the first place. And once again, the issue that we always have had with Megaservers is that this would have a massive impact on territory control and push down the options there even more unless they overhaul the entire system, which they may very well be doing in the future. but it's not what I'm seeing right now, and it's not what the fresh start server hints are pointing towards. That wouldn't really make sense with a mega server either. So I wouldn't get too excited in that regard. I think these are primarily for the console release. Client-side anti-cheat has been upgraded to the latest version. They fixed an issue that caused stored chats to occasionally appear empty, and also they fixed a rare issue that caused certain items to appear as if they were missing from the player's inventory. In terms of combat, we have a ton of fixes. Fix an issue that caused attacks not to buffer during certain animation frames of the dodge action, obviously very frustrating. Resolved issues to allow proper breakout from jumps to other actions. Fix an issue with sliding around while sprinting by adjusting acceleration for movement. So this is going to be extremely important for a lot of players. A lot of people have been complaining about this movement just feeling bad since the last patch, the last major patch. So finally we're getting this fix. An issue where projectiles would sometimes not fire towards the crosshair location, also obviously very, very frustrating. An issue that prevented movement if an emote was triggered while aiming or blocking. Fixed an issue that allowed upper body actions to continue during stuns. Fixed an issue that prevented attack buffering during the activation animation of the Primal Fury Heart Rune. Fixed an issue where corrupted portal enemies were spawning underground, which meant you couldn't finish the portal effectively. Fixed an issue where AI enemies going beyond the intended borders while giving chase to players would suddenly stop and die. Improved animation blending when cancelling dodges, full body attacks, and reactions with ranged attacks. With range attacks. Reduce the maximum pitch value for the character's combat camera while using a controller's target lock function during the Neshatun boss fight. This was done to help keep the fight's action in view. Reverted recent changes to block stability for varying equip loads to where they were pre-Season 5. So we're going back to the -10 on heavy, medium 0%, and light plus 10%. That sounds the wrong way around, unless they are describing how they've changed it. I am not sure why they're labeling it this way. Like, I will have to see what the actual result of this is, if this is just weird phrasing or if this is just a typo, because like this, it's confusing. They also reverted the recent CC changes, CC duration changes for varying equip loads. This one seems correct. This is the heavy -20%, medium -10%, and light going back to 0%. There's a lot of deja vu with these changes where I thought like some of them were already done. I'm kind of honestly losing track at this point about like certain changes being announced but not actually being implemented yet versus others that were actually implemented already. But yeah, this is the state that we're getting here. And then the same thing also applies for Shirking Empower. The perk here is going to 7% per stack for 3 stacks, from 4% Empower per stack for 4 stacks. And the total Empower increased from 21% maximum to the previous, from the previous 16% maximum. I think this way may have been something they talked about in one of the dev talks, and that's why it feels so familiar at this point. But yeah, it's a pretty decent change of overall effects, I would say. We'll see how the different weight classes feel after that. The Void Gauntlet gets a fix for the blade that was not unable to be triggered while standing in water. And they also fixed an issue where consecutive Void Gauntlet auto attacks would not turn the player in the proper direction if facing the wrong way. For the life staff, they adjusted the controller's target lock UI element to now stay on screen for the entire duration of a healing spell when using targeted healing functions for an improved user experience. I haven't used controller, I'm not a healer player, so I don't know if that's actually good, but you'll tell me. Fix an issue that caused healing abilities to trigger their mana cost and cooldown despite the spell cancelling due to the target moving out of range. Hatchet. It's episode 5 at least of this change being implemented in one way or another. Fixed an issue where Hatchet light attacks were prioritized over aimed throw after leaving a throw ability while holding down the aim button. So the long-standing issue with rending throw, where you throw your rending throw and afterwards you do a basic attack instead of throwing a projectile when you're holding right click. And that should hopefully with this fix finally be fixed. The phrasing here makes it sound like they're using a different approach to fix it this time, and that makes me a bit more hopeful that that might be the one that actually achieves what they're trying to achieve, which would finally bring throwing Hatchet back to the state that it was in, like, I think over a year ago at this point. The King Berserk perk will no longer have a low health condition. Instead, the Keen Berserk perk now grants a scaling 5%, 30%, and 20% bonus damage to bonus to crit chance and crit damage while Berserk is active. So it sounds like this scaling here is tied to health now, which I think is fine. I do believe that this, especially at this value, will be pretty interesting. If that's at like 75% HP or something, is something that can happen quite often, I reckon. And it could work in interesting ways with crit-focused builds in general. If you are going for Vicious, for example, or Rogue builds even, and you could squeeze out as much extra damage out of a crit as possible due to like having relatively good crit damage increases still. Whereas the old version gave you 50% crit chance, so a lot more overall, but the crit damage was only 25% under specific conditions, or only 10% on armor. Not exactly sure what's gonna happen here in terms of armor versus on weapon, or if this is implied this is for both. I can't imagine this being the value for on armor. So yeah, we'll have to see what direction exactly this goes into when it's live. Fire Staff fixed an issue that prevented players from swapping between Flamethrower, Pillar of Fire, and Meteor Shower abilities. I was not aware of that being a problem at all. Increased heavy damage from 110 to 120% on with the Flare passive unlocked. Also, very much deja vu, they talked about this ages ago in one of the dev talks. The Musket, they fixed an issue where a dry fire musket shot could be triggered if attempting to shoot after dodging while a reload is pending. Fixed an issue that prevented weapon reloads from triggering correctly when firing from the hip. Fixed an issue where powder burn and powder shot could trigger multiple instances of damage in a single use. Fixed an issue where powder burn and powder shot ability cooldowns were not always activated when used within shooter stance. Now the real big one, removed the accuracy penalty when rotating the player camera. So Musket's gonna feel a lot more snappy. Close range musket might possibly actually work. Could be the time to actually use the mechanic. There's not really any offset for that at the moment, which, you know, that could be concerning. We still have, it's still a projectile now, so for like any returning players, Musket is no longer hit scan, so it's not like this is gonna be entirely free, like hitting any target reliably, but at least at closer ranges, it should be fairly easy to consistently hit the target now, which I think is good, but I'm concerned about the mid-range, where it might be too easy to do too much damage too quickly. They increased the pushback on stopping power from 3 to 5 meters. Removed the headshot secondary condition from the Deadeye ultimate, instead granting a bonus if 2 or more targets are hit with a single attack, and a headshot is no longer required for that. This one likely won't really be used anymore, because the other one, the lethal combo ultimate, applies to all musket debuffs instead of just those within the Trapper tree exclusively. So that's probably what pretty much any musket build will be going for now. The Ice Gauntlet had an issue fixed where Entomb ability was triggering Refreshing Frost twice per activation. Some people were utilizing that pretty heavily, I heard. And also fixed an issue that rendered characters unable to move when teleported during an active Ice Gauntlet Entombed ability state. The bow fixed an issue where the player can attain slightly faster attack speed on the bow when cancelling Rain of Arrows, Penetrating Shot, and Poison Shot abilities. Again, a bunch of animation cancel issues with the bow that just allows you to fire faster. Reduce the Rain of Arrows, Barbed Arrows upgrade dot damage from 15% to 9% per tick, and reduce the Poison Shot dot duration from 10 to 7 seconds. They specifically said they wanted to nerf the damage over time capability of the bow. They felt that that was the wrong weapon for that, and as such, they'd rather have that on the Fire Staff, and then nerfing that aspect, and I guess might buff the bow in other ways if it feels too weak after this. But considering all the cancels and things that have been happening lately, they might just see where it is now that it may or may not finally be fixed. They also did some pretty significant changes here to the Blunderbuss. So they reduced the reload time of light attacks by 35% for what they call improved weapon usability. But along with that, they reduced the light attack damage slightly to compensate for it, coming down to 19% from 21% per pellet. So in all, that's 114% from 126% for 6 pellets. This is not like insanely much less, especially considering reload increase here is pretty quick, but it is noticeable insofar that obviously the Blunderbuss heavily relies on burst combos, and you will usually get hit by at least 2 of those shots in those combos, meaning there is still a noticeable reduction in damage, while probably not significantly nerfing the DPS of Blunderbuss in other situations due to the quicker reload. So could be an interesting trade-off, not sure. I think usually as a DPS weapon, the Blunderbuss isn't really used all too much. No, some people use it on Sandworm. You had one Blunderbuss player occasionally, but we'll see. We'll see what direction this is being taken in. I don't think it's inherently a bad path. I think the Blunderbuss is always going to be difficult to balance as long as it is like a pure burst weapon. They fixed an issue with Exhaustive Net Shot perk where the functional values were lower than the displayed values. They also reduced the performance on the Exhaustive Net Shot perk, lowering the max value for the weapons from 60% to 41%, and the max armor value from 37% down to 25%. I really don't know why they took until now to do this change, because this has been a glaring issue for well over a year. I've pointed out ages ago. I've said this value is like well above anything else. It's one of the most overpowered perks by itself in the game. And now it may finally be on a more even level with most other perks and just make sense in terms of what ranges it has. It's still a strong perk in my opinion, just not completely overbearing. So I think this is good. I like Blunderbuss. I still don't like how strong this perk was. The Flail, they adjusted the Leader of the Pack passive to increase the damage while no allies are nearby from 10 to 15%, and the Empower for allies, if one is nearby or more nearby, is up from 5 to 10%. I like that. Flail's not going to be insane because of this in terms of damage output, but the team utility aspect here I think is good. The Rapier change for Deadly Flourish that they announced, where it would apply another stack of bleed, is not going through. Upon further testing and feedback, they've decided against adding that bleed effect, and instead they will just remove the health condition for now, meaning it's just Flourish dealing a little bit more damage, like 27% on armor or 41% on weapon against any target. I don't really know why that happened. I thought that this change was a very interesting angle, especially for PvP, where you could kind of get away with like Flurry plus Flourish and Finish, or just Tondo and Flourish and Finish, and then maybe evade along with that, or riposte or something, and still do pretty good damage with it. I thought that was different and interesting. Instead, it remains pretty much a dead perk that people only have because it's locked on Finisher, because this extra damage on Flourish itself is just not relevant compared to any other damage that you're doing. So, I'm not sure why it's going that way. Spear Cyclone Invigorated combo upgrade has a label saying that it has a target limit of 2 now. The functionality of Evasive Maneuvers passive has been updated to only apply to the next dodge within 2 seconds instead of all dodges within the next 2 seconds. They already announced that a while ago as well. I think that is going to be a mildly felt nerf. Fortifying Perforate used to be 10% on armor and 25% on your weapon. That's 25% fortify per stack with up to 3 stacks. That is going down to still 10% on armor, unchanged here, but 18% on weapon per stack, which is a pretty significant decrease overall. So a little less likely that this will be used on weapon. For small scale combat, you're probably better off with Enfeebling Skewer, and for large scale, I personally would prefer Cyclone on weapon anyways. So I don't think with these nerf values you would necessarily put it on your weapon unless you have a very specific build that utilizes it very well. Maybe in a heavy build, but I don't think in a medium build you'd get more value out of it compared to a Cyclone most of the time, but that's just my feeling. The Invigorated Crits passive is no longer a flat stamina gain, and it's instead an increased stamina regeneration rate of 30% for 3 seconds on crit, which I would say is just significantly weaker and will drastically affect the mobility and sticking power of the spear in general. Sword & Shield gets a bunch of changes, particularly to Defender's Resolve. So Defender's Resolve will trigger much sooner in its animation now. The effect itself will activate on the 1st frame instead of the 21st frame, which is very good. It was always annoying that you kind of have this trade-off where you're making yourself vulnerable by giving up your block in order to get the extra benefits. And then you also have this taunt on the 8th frame, meaning that it's likely also a fair bit earlier in the animation. I guess I was also on frame 21. Along with that, the cooldown has been reduced to 35 seconds from 45 seconds. It was always ridiculously long. I still think that this value is quite high. So yeah, that's gonna make it feel better, though I don't think there are all too many non-tank builds that would make use of it. Even with a haste, it's still kind of niche because you kind of need other things. Along with that, Defender's Resolve Restoration upgrade is changed from 30% of your, is changed from 15% of your max health to 30% of your base health, which is obviously a nerf for tanks in some situations. If you stack a lot of health, then you will end up with less healing than before. And here's the same thing again in slightly different words. So yeah, those who are like heavily stacking health are not too happy about this. For more in the middle builds, it might be okay. But I think the other effects here might kind of offset that. Like if you get a lot more mitigation, it might offset that you get a little less healing, depending on your playstyle and the situation. Also, Whirling Blade has its radius increased from 2 meters to 3 meters. Just a little bit more, making it compete a little bit better with the third swing in a basic attack chain, because it's just a bigger swing, especially if an enemy is trying to get away. Don't underestimate changes like that. For example, Cyclone used to be a fairly weak ability for all intents and purposes. Then it got its animation sped up and got some adjustments to its values, and suddenly it became a staple ability on the spear. So sometimes things like this can have more of an impact than you think. In this case, I'm not too sure. I feel like obviously if you're running the Butcher, you're gonna run Whirling Blade. Outside of that, we'll have to see what happens with the other SNS changes that are coming soon that might kind of put the picture together better. Warhammer gets a buff to Mighty Gavel, increasing the damage to 190 from previously 170% scaling, which makes a lot of sense because it needs to somehow compete with Armor Breaker. And also the Summary Judgment target health requirement is changed from 30% previously health left, like below 30% health, to now being below 50% health. So overall, a fair bit more damage. Animation still makes it too clunky for PvP, but at least in PvE you can maybe use it a bit better as a somewhat DPS weapon. We're seeing some artifact changes. The first one, very interesting. Winged Leather Shoes is actually getting a 10% damage increase while haste is active. Not sure if there's going to be a base damage increase or an Empower. Depending on that, it may have more or less values in certain builds. But I do think this is definitely relevant for some builds. Think, for example, Bow. I think Bow could have fun with this. Builds that just generally throw in a keen speed and have a lot of sticking power. I do believe could be value here. It obviously is competing with Nature's Wrath, which does things differently, I would say, but can give you similar benefits. So you have to see if the trade-off is worth it for you. But obviously you also still get the other Winged Leather Shoe benefit of the duration increase, so it might be worth it for that. It effectively means some of the most toxic mobility builds can be more toxic, so yeah, don't underestimate it. Magnetic Gauntlets has its crit damage reduction reduced from 50% to 30%, which I initially thought meant that it was basically useless, but maybe not entirely. So with a Void Gauntlet you can get 1.3%, or like 30% crit damage multiplier from the weapon itself, and with the Void Blade you can get an additional 10%, so your baseline is 140%. So maybe with Rogue, for example, you could kind of push past someone's base defenses under specific circumstances, possibly. I still don't think that's something I would heavily gear towards if you're going for such a crit reduction build. I think it was like 20%, that would be more of an argument, but maybe some other builds will somehow find a way to make it effective. I'm not entirely sure. And also, obviously, where it might have more impact is in PvE, where you can more consistently get through crit thresholds. Phoenix was bugged and allowed you to go to places that you're not supposed to go if you died from specific environmental damage, like, for example, going through end-of-the-world barriers or drowning, stuff like that. So that's fixed, and we are getting Phoenix back. There was an issue preventing Consumables from cancelling melee attacks on startup. It's going to be interesting how this feels now, if you can cancel that quicker. Sometimes it felt a little bit clunky, but this will take a while to get used to, because there was also something you would eventually kind of play around and adjust to. So you could kind of like queue up the pot somewhat, or at least it felt like you could. We'll see if that is going to be better or worse now. Also fixed an issue where players could slide while using Honing Stones or coding while also using a Flail and Shield. Using a consumable item can now cancel a block action. This is interesting because if you're like a tank holding on point and just blocking and holding it down, you had to like let go of your pot of your block previously and then use the pot. And it sounds like you can just pop the pot now and it will immediately cancel your block, which is obviously also risky, but at least something worth being aware of. There are some situations where this could potentially be a downside if you somehow end up like getting knocked out of your block, but not entirely sure where that would actually apply. But generally, I think this is going to feel better and more natural. When it comes to the game modes, they fix an issue that could allow enemies to fire projectiles through Outpost Rush Fort Gates. They decrease the cost of Siege Ammo Kit from the Armory to 20 battle tokens from 30 battle tokens, sure. And they fixed an issue that could cause the Winter Runeforge puzzle to not appear when conditions were met. When it comes to the mounts, they fixed an issue where the mount did not respond to backwards movement inputs while standing still with the freeform movement toggle enabled. The UI, there was a bug with the tower camp skin being deployable in forts, and also some players were unable to access the in-game store after performing certain weapon abilities. Lots and lots happening here, but that's not all. This is just the start. We're getting the announcement this week. I have a video coming up that was meant to come out today, that's going to be tomorrow now, talking about all the upcoming changes, everything that we know so far, what we can expect from the announcement, but we have something to play with until then. I guess we have quite a few changes here, and I would assume there's a good chance that there are some more undocumented bug fixes in this patch as well, considering they took a long time to deploy that because they wanted to make sure that doesn't cause further bugs, so I'm guessing they may have done more fixes behind the scenes. I'll keep you updated on all of that. If you're interested, consider subscribing, clicking the bell so you get notified. And a huge thanks to my patrons who have supported me through all of this and also have gotten early trading tips in return. For example, one for this patch that should be paying off for some of them right now. So thanks to all of them, and thank you for watching. Sloth out.